Prospect opens this coming Friday, and you're gonna love it. I love this movie. It is just a really great science fiction film, and a really unique science fiction film, especially compared to all the other sci-fi sort of spectacles that you see today. That's not a diss, because I do like those sci-fi spectacles and those superhero movies, but Prospect is something really, really different and special, and it is produced by Dust, and it is one of many projects that Dust has coming out, but this one opens on Friday. So what do you say we bring up the writers and directors of Prospect? Their names are Chris Caldwell and Zeek Earl. Give it up. This is it right here. This is Zeek and Chris. Say hi. Hey. Hello. This is great. It's going to be fun Q&A, fun, intimate look at this movie. And please welcome the stars of Prospect. Please welcome first, you know this guy. He's been in front of and behind the camera on the big screen and small, Jay Duplass. And when you see this movie, making her feature film debut, she is in every scene of this film, and she carries the weight of it on her shoulders, physically and emotionally. Please welcome Sophie Thatcher. All right, so before we start with our Q&A on the film, what do you say we take a look at Prospect right now? So let's bring down the lights and take a look at that screen over there.
We'll find a way to get on.
$27.42 requesting release.
I'm here to harvest. I have the location of a massive deposit of Orlac. The Queen's Lair. By my estimation, it's the largest anyone's ever seen. Someone is approaching.
Where are you from?
Nowhere.
How poetic.
The Queen's Lair.
Where is it?
Drop it!
Now, this is something I have never seen. In all my time in the green, a little girl.
We're in the same trough, you and I.
You don't have a ship?
No, I don't. But you will find a way to get home if you find that buried treasure.
Why should I trust you? You're a killer.
I am indeed. But are you? I can offer protection. I say together we ravage the Queen's Lair.
Even split.
Of course.
I sustained a wound. I was hoping you had some juice.
Here is our offer. I don't understand.
For the girl.
That is a bold offer.
Well, you're gonna have to trust me.
You're trying to trick me.
It was all in the name of self-preservation, Bertie. It was nothing personal.
I gotta ask Zeek and Earl, so you not only directed the film, you co-wrote it as well. So what was the inspiration behind this? Like, where did you really start, and what were some of the films and novels and sci-fi writers that inspired?
Yeah, I mean, Chris and I have been working on this movie for like the majority of our adult lives. This is our first feature film. It's been a really long process.
We spent a lot of time trying to get the financing together to get to the green light, but what ultimately happened over the course of those years that we spent trying to get the movie made was we were always going back to the script, always going back to the world. We were working with key collaborators, our production designers, a lot of people up in Seattle that were just constantly pumping out ideas that just deepened the world in terms of, you know, coming up with new angles on the culture, on the histories, and that kind of thing.
You know, in terms of casting, I mean, this basically comes down to it's an intimate film. It's not just a you know, cast of thousands kind of thing. It really, there are a lot of quiet moments, especially Sophie for you. You know, there's more that's emoted versus actually said, which is great for an actor to do. But you know, who was the perfect C? You know, who was the perfect father and daughter, and who was the perfect stranger? What were you looking for when you were casting these three main roles?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, your turn.
I mean, so we did a kind of a big casting search for Sophie's character. We got audition tapes from, I mean, all over the U.S. and actually all over the world. And one of the things that immediately stood out to us about Sophie's tape is, I mean, not only was she a very, very competent actor, but that she kind of had a sense of timelessness. Like, Prospect doesn't take place in a contemporary world. You don't want C to feel just like a normal American teenager. You want her to feel like she's from somewhere else. And Sophie had this kind of like quality that, you know, she could be like maybe in a period piece, which is kind of often how we talked about Prospect.
So, okay, Sophie. This is, I mean, not only is it your first like feature film, but I mean, you're in every scene of this movie. I mean, so like, how did this come about for you, and how did you connect with the directors of the movie to really nail down the character?
I was sent the audition from my agents, and a lot of the auditions I do are self-tape. I have this little place in my basement where I just do all my auditions. I got a call back, I did the self-tape for that, and they flew me out to Seattle, and I read through the script, and I was just really drawn to C's character. Her character trajectory as she grows into this really powerful young woman, that's what struck me. And I immediately bonded with you guys when we met, and I trusted them, and I felt like it was going to be a special project.
And Jay, like, how did you connect with these guys about their approach to making this movie? You know, because you've done so much behind the camera as well, and you know, you're really just have always been such a big champion of independent film. So how did you connect with these guys? But also, like, what were your when you first met Sophie, how did you sort of formulate the father-daughter relationship there?
Well, I read the script, and I saw Zeek and Chris's first film, which was a short film that just basically contained like the seeds of this world and the way that they hand make everything, and it just felt very familiar to me in the sense the way my brother and I have always just kind of like made art with our hands and figure it out along the way. I really just love that they have, you know, great vision, and it's original. You know, it's just very rare that I feel like if you can make a piece of art that's original and you can tell a story well, you're already beating out 99% of people. And then when I Skyped with them, they're super smart, super conscientious, and, you know, good communicators. And I kind of pick my projects more on I think vibe than anything. And, you know, these guys, I don't know, it just felt like it was very clear that it was going to be a hometown, homemade production, and that, you know, it was human beings were going to be considered in it. So that, alongside the fact that they were casting Pedro Pascal and Sophie, and one of the things that I was like needed to do the movie was I was like, I kind of need to see a tape of the girl that's going to play C, because that's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And they showed me the tape, and in the first 10 seconds I was like, she's amazing, I'll do it.
Okay, so like when you first started working together, Sophie and Jay, like, how did you sort of expand on the relationship that was originally established in the script, and just sort of like you know, bring it more to life than what was just written on the page?
I don't know, how do we do that? I think we just hung out a lot at first, and just, yeah, I mean, we're just, you know, there was just a lot of work to be done in terms of wardrobe fittings, in terms of learning how shit worked, in terms of learning how the spaceship worked. There's just like a lot of getting up to speed on the universe that these guys built. So we were just, you know, farting around, making each other laugh and getting used to it. But I don't know, I mean, I feel like we both just kind of knew, like, I have a 10-year-old daughter. Sophie has a dad. You know, but I think that's also like part of like the casting. Like these guys hired us were like very pretty down to earth, like real people, and I think we both understood from them that like what they wanted was you know, a very realistic rendition of like a father-daughter. They didn't want it to be cute or fake in any way whatsoever. If anything, they wanted it to be kind of hard because these guys are going through hard times, and I think we just kind of like understood that and just worked that way. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
For some of the takes, we would improvise, and that helped get in the mindset of the character and get into that natural sense of the relationship. So that helped me the most, probably.
Well, I mean, the first week of shooting, you guys spent like that entire week in that pod, which was, you know, you see some of it in the trailer, but it was a 360-degree set, and it was very cramped, and there was like all the camera guys in there. So, and I feel like in a lot of ways, you couldn't stand up. You're always hunched over, and I mean, aesthetically, that's something we were really going for. We wanted space travel to feel tedious and arduous. It's a grind. And at the same time, I think that helped expedite kind of like the formation of that relationship because you're packed in this sweaty pod together, and you know, a lot.
We know what each other's farts smell like.
You know, because of the grind, the space travel. I mean, obviously, one of the movies that I really thought about was Alien. I mean, Alien is such a huge inspiration on this movie. But also, we talked before. Another film I thought about is the movie Outland. Just in terms of just how, you know, unpleasant, you know, living in space can be. And also, you know, some of the early films from like John Carpenter, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I know, Jay, it's so funny you brought it up earlier. I forgot that you kind of had to go to, like, school for this movie. We, like, gave you classes because, so one of the, like, big things for Prospect is we don't let the characters just kind of push buttons and like fly up into space. Like there's a very like a 10-minute long like sequence of you like doing like all the flight stuff.
Yeah, there was like when I went up for my first wardrobe fitting before we were shooting, I flew to Seattle, and basically we went through the sequence of what it means to undock your pod from like a space station, to launch towards a planet, to land it in an atmosphere, to go through atmosphere, to pull a parachute. I mean, it was like kind of a sequence of probably no less than 25 directives that I had to memorize in order. So basically, it started to seem really freaking intimidating at a certain point. And then what we ended up doing is we did it live, and you guys filmed it for me, and they were basically like ordering me through all the buttons to push, and then I basically spent the next 2 weeks memorizing this sequence. I spent way more time on that sequence than I did on the script. It was like way more, because they basically built a fully functional, like the panels were functional and they would light up when you would press them, and they had labels and stuff that actually made sense. So it was actually kind of a joy because it was clear. It was like, oh, but I can't, it's not like this shocking new experience to me. It had to be like, it's kind of like a Toyota Corolla, this pod. It's not cool. It's like kind of a shitty pod, you know? So
cool is a matter of perspective.
Yes, cool is a matter of perspective. It's very cool, but it's like, it's an old piece of equipment in this world. So it had to be as if like, it's what I do on a regular basis. So it actually had to be very, very seamless. So it kind of, that was kind of our introduction.
And that wasn't the only thing too, because then you had to learn, so they're going to this toxic alien moon to essentially a gold rush scenario. They need to harvest this valuable substance out of the ground, which I won't spoil for you. It's kind of disgusting, but also beautiful.
Yeah.
And you had to learn how many steps for that. Like,
Yeah, that was probably another 25
Yeah.
steps.
and the other thing I want to point out too is that Sophie, so there's several original languages that we developed scripts for the film, and in the first, you see in the first few minutes of the movie, Sophie writes it fluently.
Yeah,
Which is like,
I learned the
you
language.
you gotta pick up on this detail when you watch it, because it's like really subtle, you don't even think about it, but it's super impressive that she had to learn like an entirely new way of writing. How long did that take?
It took like 3 weeks, because you sent me it before filming, and I was just working my
And
ass
it's like a 4-second shot, like that's the only time you see it, so like you gotta pay attention.
It's all gone now.
Well, everything that you just described, okay, and like this is something that when you're watching whether it's a sci-fi movie or an action film or like any film where actors are, they're just actors. No offense. But what I mean is that like you are doing like everything you just described. Like I often wondered like when you see actors in like a spaceship and they're pushing the buttons and using the controls, and it's all second nature. Like if they've done it a million times. If they because if you look like you're looking for things, it's the commitment isn't there. The audience isn't going to buy it. But that's something you had to do too. So how did you make it all feel so easy? Looking. I mean, versus from all that sort of like sci-fi boot camp that you sort of had to go through.
It helped for her character. I called you guys and we just discussed her backstory, and this was like months before filming, just so I had an idea of who she was. And I mean, everyone helped me a lot with the process of, I don't know. You guys helped me a lot with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this conversation that we're having now, just about like all these kind of tedious details, really goes back to we really wanted this, like, it's a stylized space western adventure, but at the same time we wanted it to feel really grounded within its own world. And even like from the pod landing sequence, like the harvesting sequence, we kind of get off on those little details. And like Apollo 13 was one of my favorite movies growing up as a kid. We were big NASA sort of fanboys in a lot of ways, and we wanted to capture some of that. You don't just push a button, cut to an exterior, and now you're on the surface of an alien planet. We wanted to go through that experience with the characters and feel what it's like to go through planetary reentry. And not only that, it was the technology level kind of in this film, and part of the premise of the world is that these people don't have a lot of money, and these spacecraft and good equipment is expensive, and so they're in sort of the space equivalent of a U-Haul, something that rented, something that a bunch of people have abused, and they're risking their lives to get down on it. And so a lot of kind of like the tedium that these guys had to go through was to really give the world that groundedness.
Sophie, I want to ask just how once you went through the process of reading the material and just getting the hang of what you were going to do with the character and talk to these guys and Jay about evolving C. So because you are in every scene in the movie, did you ever get to a point where you're like, whoa?
It was overwhelming, yeah.
Yeah.
The scariest part for me was being able to portray her character arc gracefully, because I mean, it helped that we were filming it in order, so that helped. And I remember just leaving set feeling more confident as C feels more confident at the end. She starts standing up for herself, and that feeling kind of stayed with me, and I thought that was really magical.
So you filmed this chronologically, which, by the way, is a luxury to be able to do that. I mean, how rewarding was that for you to direct the film just as you wrote it?
I mean, I think it was really important because the entire film is sort of through C's eyes, and we really wanted to preserve that trajectory. Like you said at the beginning, it is in its heart, it's a coming of age story, and that's very much a progression. We wanted to preserve that. And this goes back to everything from the fact that the actors had to tolerate being their faces fully enclosed in helmets while they're on the surface of this toxic moon, that they're cramped in these tiny sets that are hot and sweaty. And I think a lot of the details of that experience seep into the portrayal of it.
You know, the other thing is, as if it wasn't just sort of, you know, really being in the moment, making a sci-fi film. You know, the both of you, especially Sophie, you're in the spacesuit the whole time. I mean, that thing. It's one thing to act, another thing to act with all that gear, and like, what was that like for both of you to you know, wear that, especially when you got the mask down? I mean, it must have been a working thing with oxygen, because otherwise you really short takes.
Yeah, exactly. The first week was really difficult because we were still working with the visors and the helmet, and it was really hard for me to breathe. But then they worked through that, and it kind of just served as an acting tool. Like, once I put on that helmet, I became the character. It really helped.
Yeah. So I have to brag here for a minute, because, like, so, you know, like in Prometheus, like, and in a lot of sci-fi movies, you know, probably about 5 minutes in, they'll come up with an excuse to take the helmets off. We didn't in Prospect, and we definitely learned why they do that. Our characters, like, don't get to escape this environment. It's a survival story. They're stuck on this toxic moon. They're stuck in their environmental suits. And I think we must have set some sort of record for, like, amount of scenes in the suits. I actually had to ask Jay right before this if he had permanent neck damage. And he thankfully does not. But we didn't really realize what we were signing our cast up for, because this was a physically rigorous process. We were out on location in an actual rainforest, like hiking, like in these suits. And yeah, I mean, thank you guys.
Yeah. And they gave me a helmet beforehand, just a couple months before, so I could get used to the heavy objects on my head.
We shipped Sophie a motorcycle helmet, strengthen her neck.
And then I took some martial arts classes just to get.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
You know, because you can't walk around. You know, you're trained astronauts and miners, really, or you got to be like, oh yeah, I wear this thing all the time. You know, that's all part of this process you were just describing.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a homemade process where you're basically, you have to figure out on the way, like Sophie said. I mean, the whole first day, she and I were freaking out the whole day, because we were like, we can't breathe. We literally can't. Like, we were doing these walking scenes, and I couldn't say the lines because I was like hyperventilating, and I was like, it feels like I'm nervous. I don't feel nervous. I think we don't have air. And we were like trying to figure it out, you know, as you go. Because it's also like so disorienting. You're just trapped in this thing. These guys are talking to us on headphones. Other people are talking, you can't hear them because they're out there, but they haven't figured out yet that you can't really hear them. You're in a rainforest, a real rainforest, where it's like just stuff to trip. It's beautiful for like 24 hours, and then it's just stuff to trip on. That's all it is. You're just like, it's beautiful, yeah, but it's just more shit to trip over. But it was like, you know, and it would be like, the next day we would like cut holes here, and then, I mean, it was like constantly. I think the whole first week we were just adjusting the helmets and the suits. Like, we need a pee hole in the suit, otherwise it takes 25 minutes off of set to go urinate somewhere. You know what I mean? So it was like there was a lot of strategy involved.
Yeah, what I love about this movie, okay, it's not a sequel, it's not a prequel, it's not a franchise. You know, it's not a Star Wars movie, it's not a superhero movie. It's like a really, really original film. And you know, I just trust me, when you see the film, you're going to love it. Let's take a look right now of a clip from Prospect. Guys, I want to set up what we're about to see so I don't spoil anything.
So this is Ezra, the character of Ezra, played by Pedro Pascal, who has just broken in to the pod where C is found.
Get the weights, girl. Shoot or help. Just make a move.
Wow, Pedro Pascal is amazing. So first, Sophie, I want to ask, what was it like? I mean, you spend the majority of your screen time with him, and it's this battle of wits, but it's also the bond that develops between this uneasy alliance, but then the sort of like, it's sort of like a classic model in a sense of the way that they do learn to like each other.
Yeah.
And sort of trust each other.
Yeah, their connection is really interesting because obviously at first she doesn't trust him, but then she opens up to him and she tells him things that she probably never told her father. It's because they spend so much time together and they have to trust each other. towards the end if they're going to make it out alive. And Pedro's just an amazing guy, great energy, super, like he brought this lightheartedness to the set, which really helped all of us.
Yeah, tell me about Cassie Pedro. He's fantastic in this movie.
I mean, we were big fans from Oberyn, from his work on Game of Thrones. I mean, we just asked him to be in the movie. I mean, for Ezra, we always knew it was going to be a challenge. His character is kind of modeled after that classic Western hyper-loquacious archetype. And Pedro is just sort of, I can't imagine anyone executing that better. It's you know, the type of guy that's always wavering on the line between being super charming and then being super menacing, and you never know kind of where he's going to land in any situation. And Pedro just has that magnetism to him that I mean, you know, you need the right. I mean, all credit goes to him in terms of like kind of realizing that. So.
What were some of the ways in which that you were able to improvise? Like, what were some of the things that sort of came out? Like, you know, as you're filming, you're just going along and come up with ideas that weren't on the page, but hey, let's try this or let's try that, or you know, you might say something that wasn't scripted. It's like, oh, that was great. You know, any good moments like that?
I mean, it's hard to improvise in a science fiction film because there's so much like very specific, like every little thing that you're interacting with was purpose built for the film itself. On top of that, there was a lot that was put into kind of the language of the way that the characters speak. Like Zeek mentioned earlier, it almost has the feeling of a period piece. We wanted kind of the tenor of the language to feel like it was from another time, which is a harder thing to improvise. I think Jay actually brought some of that into the set, where you were suggesting kind of like playing with the lines and improvising a lot more, which was really fun, and we ended up using quite a bit of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always used improvisation in my movies, and not necessarily to like make things funnier or even like better. It's more about humanizing language and interaction, and I just personally feel like when improvisation is on the table, when the other actors in the room know that anything could happen in this moment, it creates a feeling in the room. Because whether audiences know how a movie is made or not, I feel like they subconsciously understand when all bets are off and when a moment is potentially dangerous, even if it's not. I mean, I'm using the word dangerous liberally, but like, you know, like I think once you and I started improvising, we were kind of in this place where all of a sudden it's humanized in a way where like anything could really happen right here, anything could be said, and so the listening changes, and you get off of the pattern of like memorizing lines and then, you know, waiting for your time to talk. It really becomes more about listening and tuning into like what that human being is saying with their consciousness as opposed to lines. So I find that even if you're not changing the lines that much, just having that leeway makes the interaction, you know, what these guys were really looking for is like a very human, very vulnerable and tense interaction.
But also, it's interesting because like on the flip side of that, you have a character like Ezra, and he's often the one that's like driving the conversations, and his language is steeped in all of this kind of fictional vernacular. And the way Pedro talked about it a lot was he compared it almost to like performing in a Shakespeare piece, because you have to really internalize kind of the meaning, because we were throwing all kinds of lingo and stuff into his lines, and so yeah, it was very interesting that there's kind of this whole spectrum of approaches to it.
But also for Sophie, it's not just that you're in every scene. It's not that you're wearing, you know, the gear and learning the hardware and the software, I guess, you know, since you're using computers. But it's not a ton of dialogue. It's a lot of it's a nonverbal performance, which is more challenging because you don't have the words to fall back on. Mm-hmm. So how was that like for you to do that?
That was also one of the scariest things. Yeah. Just keeping an audience engaged with just your eyes. The thought of that was really scary to me. but like I said, the helmet helped. Once I put on the helmet, I was put into this mindset of C, and yeah, that helped the most probably.
I think so much credit goes to Sophie for realizing this character, and you know, there is a shape to her journey, and so much of it is not on the page in the dialogue. She's the character is relatively quiet, and so much had to be done non-verbally, and I think we didn't even fully comprehend how risky that was for the entire emotional sort of journey of the film to kind of be in that space, and we were incredibly lucky that Sophie was able to do it so well.
You know, when I look back, 42 years ago, in 1976, there's a great documentary about the making of the original Star Wars, which was just called Star Wars, by the way. None of this Episode 4, New Hope bullshit. It was just Star Wars. I'm digressing, I'm sorry. But the point is that, ILM, the studio that everyone thinks of today is being known as a massive ranch up in Northern California. It was a warehouse in Van Nuys. And you guys sort of like set up your own facility to work on the movie, to come up with like the production design and even edit the film. Like, there's a whole backstory to that, so tell us about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, the entire budget for Prospect is like the budget, I don't know, a modern Star Wars movie has for like a lightsaber fight, or probably like half a lightsaber fight.
Craft services.
Yeah, so like, we couldn't just like call up a Hollywood production design house and be like, we need 5 spacesuits and a bunch of spaceships. We had to completely start from scratch. So we rented an old boat building warehouse in Seattle that was sandwiched between a weed shop and an Episcopal bookstore. And Chris and I had just been sort of acquiring friends who could make things, but these people had never worked on a film before. It's like we had a bike builder who designed the spaceship you were just watching. And we had like a friend who remodeled houses. We had a friend who was just laid off from Boeing, who was an electrical engineer. Our production designer's background is in medical insurance. But all these people, we'd been talking about this for a long time, and they were just watching like YouTube videos on how to make stuff. It's like, just reading about 3D printing, and we assembled an entire shop. We kind of, our core crew was like, got to like 16, 20 people, and we fought for 7 months of pre-production, which is actually a really long time for an indie film. Indie films usually sometimes only get like 5 weeks. And we kind of told our financiers, look, if you give us all this time with this small group of people in our warehouse, we can make like this whole sci-fi world. And yeah, that's what we did.
I mean, one of the things from the beginning was that we always knew, and this goes back to our influences from these classic science fiction films before there was, before like green screens and CG was so prevalent. And we wanted to really channel some of that texture into this film. We wanted this world to be rendered in real physical artifacts, the props, the sets, the costumes, and we were also wanting to see how far we could push, an indie film budget in terms of rendering a scope of detail that was hugely important in making it feel real. So that practical approach was very much a part of the DNA of this film.
We had a producer come down from Canada who was to kind of oversee the film, and he showed up and he just started laughing because of how much more production design there was than like on the average film that he was in, because it's like every and like honestly, like half of it doesn't even show up on screen, which is actually why we made one of those little booklets that we were handing out today, because we developed like advertisements, brands, like all the tags on the clothing. There's a whole set of cartoon characters that sort of appear throughout the film that are like this fictional like childhood TV show. And I mean, for me, like that's the really fun stuff, when there's a whole other layer of stuff behind the movie that you're watching.
I just want to ask, because you have props. Yeah, you have props sitting right next to you. Let's talk about like the wardrobe design for the spacesuits and for our heroes and
yeah.
heroes.
I mean, kind of our approach to kind of the aesthetic of Prospect is to really just start gathering so many inspirations and stealing so many little pieces that you eventually start kind of ending up in sort of original territory. So the suits that Sophie and Jay wear are a little more inspired by like 60s, 70s space race. Again, we wanted Prospect not to feel contemporary. We wanted to feel like it's from another time and place. So we used a lot of older inspirations. So even though it's kind of like subtext, it feels like it's somehow like strangely in the past. And then again, you see like there's a whole like variety of designs. So like this guy, Zed is his name, is from like a totally another planet and culture, and you don't really get his backstory, but we actually wrote it out. We created right at the beginning almost like a Prospect Wikipedia with everyone's backstories, like their economic situations, why they all land together on this planet. So even though you don't get Zed's full story on screen, you kind of sense that there's like a bigger world and a bigger history behind the smaller story that you're watching.
I mean, and a lot of this comes from, you know, growing up on like the Star Wars Visual Encyclopedia and just obsessing over like Bosk and IG-88 and like all these one-off people, and that's one of the things that we love about interacting with these worlds is when you see just a flash of something and you can tell that there's a whole different thing going on there. But the focus of the film was very much concerned with the story of C, but just feeling the evidence of all of these interconnected stories that are kind of simmering beneath the surface. And I think another, speaking about costumes in particular, another kind of approach that we really wanted to embrace was that, you know, I think in a lot of science fiction you see a lot of kind of homogenous aesthetic being applied, where you know it's the brand all under the umbrella of some giant corporation or some military organization or otherwise. And given kind of the Western fusion that we were trying to channel, these are all freelancers. These are all independent people who bought their gear from like an Outfitters or like an REI type equivalent. And so every costume has kind of like manufacturer's labels and branding on it. They all came from different places, and we wanted to feel kind of that diversity of sources, that everything from pop culture to the gear that they're using was coming from all different places across the universe.
I gotta say, this is Chris Morrison. This is the actual actor who plays Zed, and he like needed to come and wear this costume because it's a very particular. And I just, if you guys don't mind, can we give a round of applause for these guys? These costumes are like hot and difficult to move and I really like to do it.
Well, before we wrap things up here, so Prospect is just one of the projects that Dustin has coming out. Again, the movie opens Friday. I just want to read a couple of quick reviews. I got it. Thank you. Couple quick reviews. Okay, so Hajiba calls it a gem. Slash Film says it's the kind of sci-fi we need to see more often. And let's see, Variety says this is what the standalone Star Wars movies should feel like. So that's a high praise indeed. And one very well-respected national critic said this: riveting, mesmerizing, and superb. A great film by any measure. Do you know what respected national film critic said that? I did. So let's take a look at some of the other projects that Dust has coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much. Thanks so much. Again, Prospect opens Friday. Check it out.
Hello there! Digital Game Time, your show about games, movies, and pop culture is now live every week. Follow them and watch the show every Monday on Facebook Live at 7 p.m. Pacific Time. Comment, participate, and interact with Leo, Rick, and Francisco as they tell you what's happening in the world of entertainment.